But it's 6 o'clock, and we're here to start the show tonight. We have a very special guest. I'm extremely happy and proud to introduce John Paul Caponigro to the Suspect Photography family. John Paul is a great influence on me. He comes from a great pedigree of photography and art family, and he takes it to another level. He's really changed a lot of my attitude, and calling you a mentor is an easy ask to say. So thank you so much for coming along tonight and sharing. We were talking about the conflux of years. 2017, 2018 was the last time I saw you and was able to put you on a stage with your father, which was sort of a dream come true.
Yeah, it was great. It was great.
And how's Dad doing?
At 91, Dad is doing fairly well. He's 91, but he's still kicking, still sharp. It's
Amazing.
terrific. Terrific.
You said you were here at APAD a couple of weeks ago. Did you bring your father with you?
No, I think his traveling days are over. There was a two-generation show out in Santa Fe, which I believe we actually got to see afterwards. I think that was the last effort he was going to make, but he just wasn't up to getting on the plane and, God forbid there are cancellations, all the rest of that. So, yeah.
I don't blame him one bit. But
Yeah.
I'm a little surprised. Maybe you didn't get a motorcycle with a sidecar and come zipping down.
Well, I think that would have gone really well. I don't think either one of us would have made it then.
So, so listen, this is going to be fun. I asked JP to talk a little bit about what's new, what he's been up to since it's been so long for most of us to find out what's going on. Also, we're going to ask to talk about printing and some printing tips from JP. Really, what gets it is JP has an amazing blog that goes out, a newsletter. It's called Insights. And, I was looking over some of the insights and that one printing tip about drawing the person in with a darker background and a lighter foreground on the subjects. And I thought, this is so important because as we're really getting into digital photography fully in, more people are using Lightroom and we're sharing images on social media. And I just sense that less and less printmaking is happening. And boy, when you talk about archiving, printmaking is it. When we're 150 years from now, is anyone going to be trying to figure out how to put this hard drive and what this funny connection is? And our work is going to be gone and no one's going to pay the cloud anymore and it's going to disappear. But those that print and put them in archival boxes, hopefully that will survive.
Can I challenge you on that? I have a friend, a good painter nearby, Alan McGee, wonderful, wonderful artist. He found a D.H. Lawrence portrait by Paul Strand for $5 in a garage sale. I want to remind us that half of Bach's manuscripts were used to wrap fish and no longer exist, and that Vivaldi disappeared for decades, if not longer, because his manuscripts were in some box in a vault, not Indiana Jones's vault, but I think if we care for our digital files properly, we take some steps. I think it's right. If you want them to survive longer than you're going to have to set up a foundation and make sure they're backed up in the cloud. But there are methods, and I don't think that's the only reason to print. And I think we'll touch on the many benefits of printing. I'm going to say it twice. I'll say it right now. I kind of do this, a little chiropractic adjustment when people start to tell me it's not a photograph until it's printed. I'm like, so what the heck is it? And we have to realize we're in an era where over 3 trillion photographs are made in a single year, more than all years in the history of photography put together. And that our primary way of consuming them is through phones, mobile devices on the monitor. That's a different experience. And I think what people are missing out on is the experience of making a paper experience, a substrate experience. Could be plastic, could be wood, could be all kinds of things of being able to hold the print and what that does to your nervous system, the way that it helps you share your images in an entirely different way. I love it when people come into my shows and they say, "Oh, I thought your images were beautiful before, but now I really get it." Oh, that's interesting. Now I really get it. But maybe that's also because I really get to work better because I've taken the time to make prints. I was thinking about this conversation about 15 minutes ago and said, "Oh yeah, remember that dream you had 6 days ago?" I've got two new images, which I'll show you in the new work section. And I had a dream about printing them and having them on the wall and how good that felt. So literally, prints can become dreams. Dreams come true. Uh, I think we need to speak a lot more about what are the benefits of making prints. So let's talk a little bit about that a little later in this conversation.
We'll make a note for that. And also as an extra incentive, aside from already the wisdom is just dropping left and right. On top of everything, ladies and gentlemen, at the end of this presentation, we're going to raffle off a Wacom display monitor, perfect for doing retouching work, especially. We wanted to, I've been delving into street photography lately, and there's no retouching in street photography. So I told Wacom, I said, we've got John Paul and a bunch of people that are interested in printing. We should probably give it away. Someone it'll find a good home tonight. So we'll stick around for that. Uh, you know, in terms of the lasting print and what you're saying about finding at garage sales or a flea market, and I think that's like always interesting as a photographer. We go to a flea market, we're always drawn to the pile of cameras, and then the inevitable the box. And maybe there's I think aerotype hiding inside of there somewhere, or some little treat, a lot of cardavis and all the history that's involved with that one image. I definitely want to talk to you that if in organizing it, how do you recommend, like, how much information do you put on the back of the print so that the info on the print never stays, never goes, never separates?
Sure, sure. So the information a lot of people put on a certificate of authenticity, which can be separated from the print. I put on the back of the print in on glossy, a pigmented ink print. Sorry, pigmented ink pen, like Pigma. And there are a few others. Just make sure it's pigmented, because permanent just means it's water fast. It does not mean it's light fast. All right. And archival means nothing. It connotes longevity, but technically it means nothing. It's gonna last. That's a little too Italian for me.
A little neutral pH,
Right. So I put the image title, I put the date the image was created, and then I put a date for the print when it was made. Then I put the paper, the ink, whether it's been sprayed. I use Print Shield to seal the surface of the print, extend the longevity of it, essentially light fastness, but also a little bit of the durability. And
Could
an
you,
addition number,
could you say that again? Print, what do you spray it with?
Print Shield.
Print shield.
Yeah,
Boy,
Wilhelm has tested this, so all the longevity ratings stay. And one of the things about inkjet is that they're susceptible to, quote, airborne contaminants, pollution in Chicago or whatever it happens to be. So if you don't seal the print and if you don't keep it behind glass or in a box, you're actually cutting the longevity ratings in half. It's important to just give it some protection that way.
that's why you say that. I remember print shield from back in the day. But I
Yeah,
haven't used that in a gazillion years. I wonder why. Is it,
dude,
I
you
grew
want your
up,
stuff to last?
the one thing that time is cool is that when you do go into your archive and you see what, like, those Epson stylus photo EX prints, all of
Right.
them that were exposed to before the pigment inks have really suffered a bit. The ones in
Mm.
the dark have worked quite well.
Yeah. 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 Light fastness is really good. So anyway, I think the key there is it helps people understand how to conserve a print, how to take care of it, and if there are any issues that come up, what are the materials that were made? So anybody who has expertise in conservation, whether it's in a museum or whether it's just a personal collection, people will know how to handle issues if they do come up. More importantly, not more importantly, also, people love to know how this stuff was made.
Right. No, it adds a lot to it. So keeping it directly with the print is a really good idea. Do you do that for, how about a box of prints, an archival box? Do you keep a load
Anything
of the
that's
work prints or
anything that's signed.
anything that's fine?
Yeah. If it's just work prints and you're not necessarily wanting it out there, or I have some prints that were pretty good 10 years ago, but now the papers and the inks are even better and my printing is even better. So those get to go. I
Interesting.
didn't take the time to do all the notation on all of those.
Now, what about negative archives? People who have done a proper scan of a negative, do you, what's the thought on throwing the negatives away, or do we continue to store them?
That's a good question. I still keep them. I guess I'm still old school enough that just sort of gives me the shivers. But you're right. If we had a really good scan of it, we probably wouldn't need one. In
Yeah,
some cases, make
I'm up to
brand.
a good with Manhattan Storage. I'm at a good $60 to store the prints and negatives, and I
Sure.
mean hitting those negatives again. And I like to think that I made the best scans. Of course, there's probably something good in there, but it costs a lot to store them, keep them all
It's
the
true.
time.
It's
Okay,
true.
so
And
let's get back to printing in a little bit. Let's talk about some other things that you've been up to, some new journeys, and also as I kind of reintroduced myself to you and kind of went down the rabbit hole a little bit. I really like where you were going with the pilgrimage and the journey, and I would say that since I've kind of been in this, went from doing conferences at B&H, now I'm producing workshops and doing workshops. It really is a journey and a pilgrimage for 5 days from the minute that a workshop starts to the camaraderie that builds to the work that gets created. And then all of a sudden that 5 day period or 7 day period is over and what have you done? Where have you gone? And you likening that to a pilgrimage on a sacred journey kind of, that
right,
resonates.
right, right. Actually, there's a beautiful little book I sometimes give out to my workshop students, at least in the field. I think it's Joseph Dispenza's. It could be The Art of Pilgrimage. But anyway, Dispenza has a really nice short book on just that, how every journey has these stages, these rites of passage from the moment you open the door and step out first to the end when you open the door again from the other side and close it behind you. There's the whole cycle, the whole process. It's nice to look at the inflection points and think about what you might want to mark and even have a little ritual to celebrate or to just tune in.
I, I like a ritual to celebrate. I kind of like that. Mine was getting drunk the night after, right? Having a
I think
fabulous
that's
dinner.
true for
It
many
was,
people.
it was Mexican. I really don't drink that much, but I was like, I'm going to drink heavy tonight. That was.
Sure.
You said
But to pick
Joe
up on
just
our last conversation, maybe making a print could also bookend it in a nice way. It could be a
well,
nice ritual.
well, that's just discipline because after completing weeks of travel workshops, you accumulate just folders of images, and it's really a joy to go back to them a couple of weeks later and find some gems in there and some new ones and go
Yeah,
through
thank you for phrasing it that way rather than that's just discipline. It's it's pure pleasure, right?
it. It is oh, what happened here? Um, you were co-editing Diane. Wait a minute, this shouldn't be. This should
Somebody's exploring new tools.
Yeah, that should stop. Okay. So well, I mean, it's a healthy discipline, but I think the joy of photography, the clicking, the making the image, the getting into it, your initial download, your first look, and then once
Yeah,
you kind of sort through, and then it can't really end there. It's a continuous starring practice, going back in, and then finding the best ones to to tweak for printing as opposed to just tweaking for Instagram. Uh,
right.
those those are great. Those are great, and it takes time. You can delve into that. A couple of hours goes by easily. You had said before Joe Dispenza, and what was the name of the book?
I think it's the art of pilgrimage.
The
I'll have
Art
to
of
check.
Pilgrimage.
It
Okay,
definitely has pilgrimage in the title.
okay. I,
Yeah,
I
but
went to
it,
school with the Joe Dispenza. I'm absolutely sure that this isn't the same Joe Dispenza.
yeah, it's not, and it's not. There's a doctor out there, a psychologist or a self-help guru. It's not him either. So there are a couple of Joe Dispenzas out there as well.
Right, so where have you been taking your pilgrimage to lately? What's the locations?
I recently got back from northern Argentina in the Puna Desert, basically abutting the Atacama Desert. Let's not get into the nomenclature there, but it's high 11,000 foot deserts. And we were at this one place I've been wanting to go back to for years. I consider places friends, and I like to have a conversation with them, and I like to check up on them. And I was hungry to go back to this one place. It's a haunted place. It's a pumice outflow from a distant volcano, and the entire valley was flooded with this. Um, they call it pumice, but it's quite a bit harder. It's not as hard as obsidian. Of course, it's porous, a lot of air in it. So it has a kind of a glassy, tough sheen on it, but it's also very light and light in color. And over the years, tens of thousands of years, it's cracked, and you have these small canyons in between them, these black dunes. The wind whistles through it. You've got that glorious sky up at 11,000 feet. The stars are off the hook, just amazing. And the wind's whistling through these canyons, and the place just feels possessed. I love places like that. So that's the Pumice Stonefield. And then we moved up to Bolivia, across the border, a harrowing experience, crossing any border. But we got up to Uyuni, which is the largest salt flat in the world.
Oh, wow.
Um, Absolutely, absolutely beautiful, gorgeous. When you go there at the right time of year, there's usually a few inches of water in certain areas, and so you have this. If there's no wind, you have this mirror-like surface, which we were lucky enough to be able to catch pre-dawn and after sunset, and catch incredible Milky Way reflections. It
Oh,
was it
wow.
was phenomenal. I have another video on my website called Sublime Experiences, and Uyuni is one of them. And the first time that I was there, we had these beautiful storm clouds. And so when you're walking, your footsteps are making ripples in the sky, and you get vertigo. Absolutely loved
How,
walking in the sky and getting vertigo.
how many
This
feet
time
is that?
with stars.
How high
What's
up
that?
is it? How high up is that?
It's around 11,000 feet, maybe a little higher, 11, 11.5. Yeah.
Interesting. Any challenges with that height to performing photography? Is the schlepping a little bit harder, or is
Yeah, I mean, you just plan to walk a little slower. You plan not to run as fast. Sometimes it gets in the way of your sleeping. Many people will find themselves gasping every fourth breath, and so they sleep a little lighter. Just because you need to kind of catch up.
okay?
Um, for the first time, I knew there were going to be enough hassles on this trip, a lot of logistics that I just didn't want to be dealing with it. I took Dimox for altitude, and I had absolutely no problems and no side effects. And so if anybody has any challenges like that, I can tell you it really worked for me. Either that or my time on the treadmill is really paying off.
I'd say
No.
it is. I'm, I'm talking with a trainer to try to develop a program for photographers based on
Mm.
endurance, agility, and stretching. Because if a photographer doesn't stretch, you know, we're 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 tall guys, JP. We can't always
I-
be looking down on subjects. You gotta squat with that camera.
There you go. Photo yoga.
So you're leading. How many workshops are you doing a year? Would you say? I
Depends.
should say out of Cushing, Maine.
Out of Cushing, Maine, there's probably four here in state. Like there's a color workshop coming up in June. I've taught that only a few times, and I'm doing it again because I've been leaning into color a lot. You'll see that on my website, my blog, my newsletter. And the two printing workshops, three printing workshops. There's an intermediate workshop. I have a master class that's people can apply for. That's you got to have the chops and you got to have the body of work. Once you have that, then you can come play in a smaller crew, and it's very customized. And then I have a black and white workshop at the end of the year, which is essentially the same workshop that I do in July for intermediate, but we take a deeper dive into into black and white conversions and the aesthetics of black and white. Though a lot of people will say, well, no, but I still print color. And I'm saying, like, yeah, you need color management even more for black and white. I mean, to actually reproduce neutral colors and get good gray balance across the tonal scale, that's a supreme challenge for color management. And I just, I feel like we need to rearrange our language. There's this schism because of this stuff we used to use called film, which is what happens on my teeth every morning, but I don't use the old stuff anymore. That you load your camera and you're choosing black and white or color from the get-go, but now that's no longer the case, and we're using the same inks. Can we get back to black and gray and white? They're beautiful colors. If you can see it, it's color. That's our visual response, and they're also the colors that all the other colors share. So anyway, three printing workshops, one in a field up in Acadia, and then a couple offsite. I think I have one more space left in White Sands in the end of September.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, listen, anyone who's new and wants to go up a level, I highly recommend definitely, sign up for a workshop from JP and check it out, because uh, I think that printing was much more difficult about 15 years ago. It seems to have gotten for the base level really easier and pretty darn accurate. But to go to that next level, to get the nuance, get the depth in there, then I think that's the realm that you're talking about.
Exactly. Now we can really go for it, and the materials are doing what they couldn't before. I'm hearing all of this, and also recognize Jeff Sheeby is here on this session with us, and Jeff and I went out on the Epson Print Academy several times, helping people, and also consulting with Epson and other companies like Adobe to help build better tools and to solve our needs and everybody else's needs, kind of make a better tool for everybody in a better community. So thank you, Jeff, for being a part of that initiative to kind of lift everybody up. And yes, we're reaping those benefits. I wish that more people were printing. I wish there were more money in printing right now because those economic factors are slowing down the innovation. And what corporations often don't have is vision. Artists do. I feel like we slowed down right when digital surpassed all of the characteristics of analog. We got a little bit better, but we could go a lot further. And I'd like a little market pressure to push it into a territory where it's printing the likes of which we'd never seen before. It still is. I mean, we're making 40 by 60 prints in our studios. We're printing on wood. We're printing on plastic. We're printing on metal. There's so many very cool things happening. And we're also going back to historic processes, and we've seen a resurgence of the history of photography, and that's wonderful too. But there are so many things that we could do to push it even further. And I know I've been hungry to see that happen and a little disappointed that that's slowed down. And
I don't
I'd
think
like to
it's
see that
necessarily
come back.
the slowdown, I think, was because the traffic made a right turn into the social media sharing world. That's where, if you think about it, how did you share your work 20 years ago? It- you had to, yeah, you really had to share prints. You walked with your portfolio. Portfolios were king, uh, and you worked. There were so many labs to work with,
Yeah.
and those days are gone. Just an interesting note: a friend of mine who has a teenage daughter. There's a trend with analog and film is kind of back, and I love it because I see people walking around New York City all the time with like a Pentax ME Super and
All
and
right.
a 1.9 Super Takamura lens or
Yeah.
1.
Yeah.
And it just goes back to when we started that simplicity. But his uh, his dad's or her dad was a photographer, and the story goes is that he set her up with her friends, and he bought her one of those Godox flashes and put it on top of the camera, and something happened with the sync that we all remember, and basically half when she got the prints back, there was a black bar that was going through a third of the print, two-thirds of the print, half the print, kind of shift
Yeah.
around.
Yeah.
And he was appalled that it happened. He was like, "Oh, the sync was off. The flash. It's like really, it's just a junior mistake." And she was like, "No problem, Dad. It's all good." And she took it and she cut the pictures and she made new layouts and completely was not flummoxed at that where we would have so
Would have been ruined before.
oh my God. But incorrect sync is that's it. You make that mistake in the studio once and you explain to a bride, yeah, sorry, during the all the formal pictures, they're half black. It wouldn't work. But she didn't care. She just rolled with it. It was sort of enlightening to see that mindset just paradigm shift over.
That's great. That flexibility. I mean, but you're raising something that's kind of interesting. I was having a conversation with a young friend of mine. He's a young filmmaker. So he's grown up in the digital world. And he says, I've discovered analog photography and I love just going out there with 36 frames. I'm just walking around and it really slows me down and helps me tune in. I said, like, Gerard, I mean, get a meditation practice or just walk slower or, shoot slower. What do you need film to like slow you down on? But he didn't necessarily have those, and he had analog photography, and it was getting him out there, and that was his experience. And I said, okay, so line up a little bit here, buddy. Like if people want that for their experience of kind of slow cooking life, go for it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's process in the end. It's the a film camera has nuances that a digital certainly doesn't have, and a digital camera,
Please list them. You're reminding me of Sean Kernan years ago, before all of this got really good. He sits down across the table for me at the main media workshops. And Sean, if you don't know him, I mean, you know him, but if the rest of you don't know him, watch your conversation with Sean or my conversation with him. He's one of the most articulate photographers around, right? If
very,
anybody can
very
put things in
quotable too.
order, Yeah, exactly. So he sits down, he says, what do you think about this digital stuff? It just doesn't have this je ne sais quoi. It's like, Kernan, if you of all people are retreating into this vague French, we're in trouble. What are you looking for? Are you looking for acuity? Are you looking for a longer tonal scale? Are you looking for Dmax? Are you looking for grain structure? What are you looking for? Because if you can tell me and everybody else, they say the manufacturers what you're looking for, we can ask them to build a better widget. But I want to get away from this whole mystification and analog is sexy because it's historical and it's got a certain something. Well, tell me what that certain something is, right? And let's be really clear about what we're choosing and why we're choosing it. I'm not at all prejudiced against the old. I'm just saying I don't want to sensationalize it or make it into more than it is through our own lack of clarity.
I think it is part of the journey, and I'm going to, since we're onto this topic, I'll share with you. I got to go to Normandy and photograph the landing beaches, and it was a whole process and a whole plan, and I really kind of thought it out. And I said, how can I pay honor to the men who gave them lives on
Mhm.
Omaha Beach and do it properly? And I thought about at the time a Canon 5D Mark III was the camera du jour, and I decided to bust out the 8x10 Deerdorf and put myself through bringing 8x10 film through JFK to Charles de Gaulle, schlepping the holders, going into a closet in my bed and breakfast in Carrington and redoing the film, and only going out for a day shooting with having 8 shots basically before if I had to go back to home base and redo all that. And to me, creating the big 8x10 negative was a big deal. It allowed me to do some contact printing and made platinum palladium. Of course, the digital negative surpasses a true negative for alternate, 100%. But it was that's where the process came in, and certainly the work has a certain look about it from shooting with an 8x10. Uh, it creating it definitely did something. It was a different experience altogether, and maybe that on the journey, on the pilgrimage,
Definitely.
sometimes you have a walking cane or you have you're in the back of a caravan. I think it's part of it. But I hear you about not romanticizing. Oh no, I could romanticize it. Why not romanticize it
You
when
know,
you
romanticize it, but let's just get logical about it as well. You're looking for specific things, and when you say there are benefits, let's get clear about what those benefits are, because I don't think wearing a holy shirt, a hair shirt is going to get you closer to God. You're going to change your experience, and maybe you get there that way.
yeah.
But
But in defense of digital, I you and I really we were on we grew up in the incursion of digital, and we've seen our feet are in both sides of the yard, and we
yeah,
get it on that sense. But I'm really shocked when I left my position at B&H Photo and I got back 100% into photography. Wow, the new generation mirrorless cameras with the autofocus system and it is astounding. I mean,
it really is.
I can remember when I was 18 years old picking up a Minolta Maxim 7000 and listening to that autofocus go back hunting. And as that got so much better, but the face recognition and the speed of focusing, and it captures before or during the picture, after, it's stunning, and it's hard. The thought of going into the closet and pulling out that 8x10 is it's pretty tough.
We've got it so good, and that means we have to be even clearer about what it is we're trying to say. Like, what are we putting into the picture? What are we bringing to the picture? But before we get off the old analog, I'd like to just sort of raise guys like Keith Carter, who know the history of photography, teach the history of photography. The history of photography informs their work. And by using historical processes, they're making all of those references within their own work and connecting to all of that. It takes on a certain significance based on the life lived and the kind of work he's trying to make. That then seems really appropriate. But that's not necessarily the statement of everybody else. So we have to just find how is the tool shaping our experience, and how does the tool reinforce the statement we're trying to make, rather than make these je ne sais quoi statements. Let's just get clear about it.
Well,
So if it's easy to make a photograph these days, now it's on us to make better photographs.
hmm. The
Just because it's well focused doesn't mean that the vision of the artist is well focused.
With the 80th anniversary of D-Day coming up, I expanded, and made a small series of prints, printed them out, put them into mats, sealed them up, and then
Hmm.
had the statement on the back. And I did proudly mention that those 5x7 landscape photos were actually shot with an 8x10 camera. So that did kind of, it did all sort of come in, even though it was actually a reduction of size. But listen, JP, let's see some work. You got some work queued up in a folder for us to share. Let's see what you got.
Yeah, sure. We're lurching through.
Enough talking. While you're doing that, I'm going to check the chats. A couple of people are asking some questions.
Yeah, cool, cool. Um, I'm going to talk a little bit about the color work that I mentioned before. Um, well, been fascinated with color all of my life, and I'm leaning into it a lot more in the last couple of years. And I have to disclose that it's useful to understand that I went to school and studied painting, and then in the summers I studied with I had a good photography teacher. I think his name was Paul Caponigro, right? But my initial interest in making photographs was to make good reference for the paintings that I was making, right? So here I was studying painting. My mother's a painter as well, right? Also in there to make it a little more complicated, I had some questions about what does photography do? Like that art of discovery video that you played. I think photography does some really fascinating things and expands our perception in marvelous ways. So I just want to talk a little bit about color because there's so many things I could talk about. Let's focus a little bit on color here. Um, as I've mentioned, yeah, hang on a second. Um, Black, gray, white, all colors. Now, these would be what Jay Maisel might call no color photographs. That's pretty funny. So what do we mean by all of that? These are obviously a little different than the what Greg Gorman would call dead nuts neutral photograph, where you've stripped all of the hue and saturation out of the image. This is the palette we're often thinking of as black and white. So then there's this other black and white medium called cyanotype, which is really blue and white, or wait, blue and black and gray and white, as platinum is some kind of earth tone and white and gray and black, right? So I think it's useful to be thinking about what these trace amounts of hue and saturation do to the emotional expression and depth. I remember being a kid in the darkroom with my dad, and I was like, Dad, why are you using all these different papers and these different developers? Well, to get color in black and white images. What? Yeah, let me show you. And so he'd show me the difference between Ardal and some other developer, and what would happen to an image when you selenium toned it, or why he might choose Nilford paper over Kodak paper for a particular image, and how that might color the emotional experience and also change spatial relationships within the image. That these trace amounts of color, these whispers of color, could do so much for the image, both visually and emotionally. And that sent me down this rabbit hole of color, along with my mother showed me Albert's color theory, showed me painting. I studied it. Here, earth tones, full color earth tones with blacks and grays and whites, right? So I've been fascinated about that. I've also been really interested in how color changes with time and atmosphere. So this is a shot of Seljalandsfoss in Iceland. It's the waterfall you can walk behind. And it took me 4 trips to be there at the right time when there was no cloud on the horizon. We'd get color, because once you get color, as the light warms up, it takes on a whole different character. Same waterfall rushing past you, never the same twice. And then there's this flow of water, there's this flow of sound, there's this flow of color. It's a physical experience. The color is part of that physical experience, and it catches fire, right? this was one of those sublime moments I mentioned again in the video, uh, where it was really the waterfall was too loud to have a conversation, and you got to be silent and just listen to the water, watch it rush by, and watch it slowly chameleon through all of these different states until it disappears and the stars start to come out. Really wonderful experience, and you know, um, photography is a passport. It gets you to go places that you might not go to otherwise. And it's also a call to mindfulness, to being still, to really looking. And that might be a form of listening, and secondarily, celebrating in a particular way. Making a photograph is also an acknowledgement. It can be a celebration. It can be a way of tuning in, of looking closer, and of holding that a little longer. We get to look at it long after and consider it. This went by in not even seconds, fractions of a second. And yet now I can come back to it again and again and revisit that experience and see more than I could see with my naked eye at that time. So it really expands us in sensitivity. There's a long-standing conversation about color and using an analogy of music. This goes way back in Western art history. Goethe even assigned musical notes to specific colors. And I think there's a real connection between color and sound. Both are vibrations that we receive with our bodies. And I think that we use them for expressive purposes in this case. So that sense of color striking a chord, creating a resonance within us, a felt sensation. And here you can see I'm looking at the surface and under the surface. These are really just images of water and light. This, by the way, is the one that I dreamt about making the print of and having it on the wall and feeling good about, along with.
You sound like the Bishop of Avranches in the 7th century who had a dream and a vision to go build Mont Saint Michel.
A lot of us have had dreams. You wouldn't believe the number of scientific breakthroughs that come through dreams as well. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm very interested in the dream world. We could talk about that later.
Beautiful work as always. You kind of surprised me. The first shot of the waterfall that had more of a direct slice going through it. I saw that on the website, and I was super curious how you made that image because it. So I thought perhaps you turned the canvas, you rotated it, but you were
Hmm.
behind the waterfall and the capturing the. Very cool, very amazing.
So in a way, like reading a poem, color can be silent music. So I'm interested in capturing the color that's there, but I'm happy to ramp up the color that is latent and make it more obvious, more pronounced, even make it more visible, or change it altogether. A blue sky can become tangerine. And while I'm doing this for expressive purposes, emotional, psychological, scientists do it for another reason. The colors that we see on nebulas, shot in entirely different spectrum than human eye can see, are used to encode different kind of information so that they can decode the nebula. Color is an interesting code, interesting to see how we use it. We all use color differently, and I think color can become a code that knits together a body of work, a personal sensibility. I've been doing a series of blog posts on my website um, on color grading and color in movies. I've always said that photographers can learn a lot from color theory, the color theory of painters. And we can also learn a lot from how our fellow photographers who work in 24 frames a second or faster also um, color grade their images. So There are a lot of resources on my website. I'll show you real quickly. Not that one, that resource. On my website, if you start out on my blog, you can get to my library from here, and under it, you'll see all kinds of things from color management to color adjustment, some color theory, color psychology, and some color quotes, great quotes throughout the history of. So huge part. And let's not forget black and white, another part of that color suite. Um, so just on the color adjustment, you'll see there are a whole lot of things like 4 ways to achieve neutrality in your images. One might think about color correcting the image, but I challenge that terminology. What is correct color? There might be correct color if you're doing product photography. For Coca-Cola, there's one red they want, or Kodak, there's one yellow they want. But after that, whose correct are we talking about? That kind of local color painters might call that, or are we talking Monet's? The correct color of this tree at this moment in time, at this hour, with this atmosphere is what I can observe. You see, it's a much more complicated conversation. And I think photographers are too often told to get it right when really it's right for who? What are you trying to do? You first have to figure out what you're trying to do. And sometimes you have to make a lot of photographs to figure that out. But once you figure that out, it really becomes right for you. A lot of people, well, the way that I remember it, I guarantee you, you can't remember it. But if you actually learn a more precise language for describing color, and I would use numbers, HSL, then you could actually make some notes that would help you remember it. Because even a gray card in those golden hours is not neutral. So anyway, that's the kind of stuff we discuss in this color course that's coming up. And there's a lot of resources up there. If you find members only resources, I guess I'll do that here. Here, enjoy my library. Some of them are for members only, and the newsletter is free. If you sign up, then you can access them. That's that Illuminating Creativity section. And I also wanted to alert folks, I guess that icon needs to get back up there. So let me jump to that. I've given away a free digital printing quick start guide. So if you're interested in printing, this ebook will take you through it from A to Z in a very quick, efficient way. It's not going to be as comprehensive as, say, Shiwi's book on digital printing, the printed book. This is your quick start guide, and it's free and easily accessible.
Where can we find that, JP?
It's right up on the website. I'll make sure that on any of the printing pages, a lot of the technique pages there, but I'll also put that icon back up on the blog sidebar as well to make it easier for folks.
Okay. No, that sounds great. And I think that answers the question, but I would ask, obviously there's so much depth to color and what we're talking about with the print. For those that are, I still like to cater to those who are just starting off, people who are falling in love with photography, either again, and they're mystified at where they're at. And I've always said that like lighting and printers it's like a fourth wall that they have to break through. So can you share some tips on if you wanted to pursue printing, where's a good place to start? And obviously an Epson printer bought from B&H Photo is really the first answer, but is
Right.
How would you start this road down if you were going to allow the bug of printing to bite you? Where should it bite you?
Download that book and start making prints.
Oh.
Seriously, use an Epson paper with their Epson profiles because the profiles are amazing. When you need to go to a third-party paper, you need to start making your own profiles. There's an art to that. One shouldn't be afraid of that, but it's probably not something the beginner wants to get started with. The Epson profiles are excellent. Just get started, start making prints. Then I'd recommend you start paying more attention to what are you looking for in prints, and I don't think that's discussed enough. A lot of people are looking for detail in your shadows and your highlights and your midtones and the separations. You start developing an eye for tonal separation, contrast, and you start looking at the tools in Photoshop and Lightroom that'll help you get that. And proper sharpening. Once again, Jeff here, PhotoKit Sharpener, and picking up Bruce Fraser's wonderful book, Real World Image Sharpening, and making it an even better book. Jeff really leveled that book up. That's still a fabulous resource for we're starting to take control of something that photographers didn't have control over in the past. Frequency of detail. to be able to separate texture from contour and to be able to make things look sharper or softer in post like we can today. I still see so few photographers really using the new tools in sensitive and innovative ways. I feel like still playing a 20th century game. It's like, come on, guys, we're 25 years in. Um, let's start using this as visual vocabulary and not be um, faithful to the analog practices. Let's start looking at our images and see how they're working on our nervous systems and start searching our souls about how we want our images to look and how we want them to move other people. This is incredible control over essential image vocabulary, and you can create a look and feel that has, in many cases, never existed before.
Hmm. Would you recommend Photoshop or Lightroom with the vast majority of people using Lightroom? Does that make any difference for printing?
I'd start with Lightroom. If you're already a Lightroom user, for sure, stay there. The print module, um, they did a lot of research with a lot of us. I know Kevin T. Scudder and a number of the guys, Mark Hamburg and others, came into my printing workshops. They asked people like Jeff, and they really did their research, and then they continued to evolve it to be able to print multiple images at the same time, put it on the page at different sizes, have the output sharpening, which is based on the PhotoKit stuff that I mentioned with Jeff and his Pixel Genius crew, um, automatic upsampling on the fly. It's a brilliant print engine. It's really great. There are still certain things for fine tuning a file that Photoshop does a better job with, but the two are super fluid. Just open it up from Lightroom into Photoshop, save it.
Mhm.
You don't even have to close it. Print from Lightroom, look at your proof. You want to make a little tweak, you tweak your file, you save it again, you print it again. The two just work brilliantly together. But if you were only using one, or if you hadn't jumped into the Photoshop briar patch, um, start with Lightroom.
Sure, okay. That's it. You know, when you said before thinking last century, Photoshop is very last century. It's Lightroom is far more intuitive and easier to broker your images with than Photoshop ever was. Photoshop was, I still feel comfortable with those old looking menus and tools, but it's really quite, we're talking 1995, 94, right? Or so it's
Yeah,
really
earlier. Yeah, and even with Lightroom, the earlier versions of Lightroom, I'm hearing Bruce Fraser's voice in my head. Would it be useful to have a 5 pixel feathered brush to burn and dodge your images with? Would it? It's a deal breaker without. You know, these were some of the early debates. Miss
all
him.
right. I'm gonna go. We talked with some emails and we said sort of what we were going to discuss and whatnot. And in the back of my head, I kind of want to throw you a little bit of a loop, and it's the talking point of this century and just really this year,
Hmm.
AI. What do you think of the generative fill and AI? Where's it going? And what's your thoughts there, JP? This is a big deal.
It is a huge deal, and it's going to move so much faster than Photoshop. Photoshop and digital printing moved so fast, and this is going to move even faster. What happened in 25 years in digital printing is going to probably we're going to see that kind of change in 5 years or less, and possibly more change. Um, I think there hasn't been enough conversation about the different kinds of applications of AI and different types of AI that we're using. I think there's a substantial difference between using content-aware fill, which samples the image that you've created to create new texture from that one image, versus generative fill, which is sampling thousands of images or more out on the web that are not that, and rendering images rather than capturing it optically. It's a different kind of beast. And so it changes the nature of the photograph, right? If you start to fill things in, it's like a composite, but unlike all of the composites I showed you today, those are actually my photographs, right? They are actual photographs, but they're feathered together like Jerry Ullsman's surreal collages. When you use text to generate an image, it's a very different thing. I'm not saying it's good or bad. I think it's just different. And we need to be having conversations about when we feel it's appropriate. And when I say appropriate, I mean that it suits the work. And even in which context is it not appropriate? CNN, the New York Times, unless they go out of their way to say this is a photo illustration. But I mean, it's absolutely fascinating that we're looking at. Have you seen Adobe stock and you've seen all those Gaza kids that are rendered up on Adobe stock? It's just it's uncanny. Do a search. It's just uncanny to see these AI rendered victim images made made up, right?
It's also in the year that we've been really exposed to it. Well, I think or maybe a year and a couple of months. It seems to be January, February of 2023. It seemed to really explode. Everyone's profile pictures on social media changed, and it started to hit. And I tried to use it to help complete a project, but the six fingers on one hand and the slop, and then starting to that slop is getting really hard to find now. Those AI mistakes.
It's getting better, better and better.
And yeah, it poses so many questions. But I did
And
see
we need to be struggling with those questions, and we need to be having smart conversations. Not, it's inherently bad. It's ruining photography. No, it's a different beast. It's.
yeah, it's
I hesitate to call it photography only because there hasn't been a direct light recording, and then it's a mashup of many other light recordings. So it's a whole new kind of photography that's really quite fascinating. And so I haven't jumped into this largely because I've been writing my brains out. I've written 3 or 4 books of poetry and some creative nonfiction that's going into exhibits and portfolios and future publications. Um, but now I think it's just hit an inflection point. I'm really excited about the new being able to use a reference image in Firefly, which is now built right into Photoshop. And it feels like it's hit a really mature inflection point. And I've been thinking long and hard for several years about how I would use it and how that would change um, the conversation in my life's work, how other people would be looking at the life's work. I remember having a conversation with Jerry Ullsman years ago, and he was saying, "Yeah, once I retire from teaching, I think I'm going to go back to my classic images and remaster them in Photoshop." He never did. And I think that's in part because he was thinking about his historic legacy. That's my guess. I don't have that directly from Jerry, but I think it's fascinating that even though he expressed interest, he never went there. Um, that's not what I'm saying. I just haven't jumped into AI, or at least I haven't released anything because I want it to be making a statement and it needs to be using the medium that this is AI and AI does something different than photography. And that's part of the statement, not just a convenience.
I think most of us are very excited about our own stock as the reference images being pulled in. There's a randomness to it, but to me, it sounds like I can live with AI if it's working, if I trained it, if it's my AI and it's using my images, and evidently that's starting to truly show up. I think that's what a lot of people want because then it's genuine. I mean, the thought of having images sourced from the internet integrated into my images in a random fashion, that sounds horrible, right? It doesn't sound like
No,
really
I
that.
actually think it sounds fascinating. It's one of the things I'm going to be using. I think it's like a collective unconscious.
One thing I would recommend for you is have a nice draught of wine and take your poetry and drop it into an AI construct just to see what it does.
I've been doing that.
We've
Yeah,
never-
yeah. The first thing I used ChatGPT to do was write my obituary. It was a lousy obituary. I can
That's
write a better obituary, but it maybe
well,
it's
the time.
true.
Yeah, in a couple of years though, that's the AI will be so good that it
But
won't.
let me wind that back. When you say we're excited about working with our images, are we excited about moving from being a nonfiction writer to a fiction writer? And what do we want to say with fiction, and why are we saying it that way? Now, Shakespeare did both his histories and his Greek plays, like A Midsummer Night's Dream, right? So, when do we want to move between those two, and how is the dialogue between fiction and nonfiction going to help uh, clarify and deepen the kinds of statements that we're making? Because it's just not accurate to say that the two are the same. And authenticity is um, this whole authenticity dialogue has been going on for far too long, and I remember it's been used prejudicially against digital a long time ago. A well-known collector and provider of platinum materials came in, looked at some of my early inkjets that were what I call digital equivalents to alternative processes. So I was making platinums and cyanotypes. Some of the images I actually showed you earlier tonight. All right. I didn't tell him what he was looking at. I just showed him prints. Wow, these are fantastic. Like, wow, these are really interesting. So, okay, so these are actually platinum and these are inkjet. You're kidding me. Get me my loop. And he loops them, but he doesn't loop the platinum. I said, hey, you forgot something. Loop the platinum. Oh, I know what those look like. Yeah, I'm sure you do, but why aren't we looking at them in the same way? And he said, these inkjets, they're beautiful, but they're not as authentic. And it reminded me of that scene in the Dead Poets Society with Robin Williams. They're reading in the book, and you see, if you plot creativity on an XY axis, what does he do? He tells the class, take this page, rip it out of the book, and throw it in this trash can, because it's not the right conversation to be having. Authenticity doesn't come from materials. It comes from us. It comes from the disclosure. It comes from telling folks what we're trying to do and being honest with what we're doing. There's nothing wrong with fiction. I love fiction. There's nothing wrong with nonfiction. Love nonfiction too. I just don't like it when people tell me that fiction is nonfiction. I just want the truth. Tell it like it is.
What's cool about the Pigment print is that now when you went to APAD and you see work, if it's a dead photographer, you'll see some vintage prints of theirs, and that'll be silver prints, platinum. But boy, the vast majority of all the new work is like pigment print, pigment. That's it. It's really dominated. Uh, it's a
And then, yeah,
preferred medium now, where
right.
it
Back in
was
the
sort
day,
of like, are you
digital is the
cheating?
future.
Where you want to hear you had inkjet print? You did that without all the pain of a dark room and chromes and all those crazy, what color
Right.
processing would you have been working with had the evolution of the inkjet print not evolved?
Yeah, because it's old materials and blood, sweat, and tears that gets us
Yeah.
to sublimity.
The
That's where
other half
books
is A and I, AI. The other half of it is within the workflow side of things, and
yeah.
it's uh, I think much like you work a little bit. I'm gonna say you work on a print, you seek that print out, you're working on it, where uh, AI for professional photographer for retouching is doing some real wonders, where the lab would have spent quite a bit of time working on the retouching or whatnot, and AI
Absolutely.
workflow is huge. So that's sort of welcome. You can't, I don't think anyone in their right mind can really deny an AI workflow to make the tedious tasks of photography go by easier.
I
And that's
agree
much
completely. Yeah.
different beast than generative fill, but it's an aspect of it.
Like,
So that's
here's my other theory. I actually think that AI is going to restore people's faith in photography. We really should not be believing photography just because it's a photograph. It's convenient for us to do that, but we really have no verification, nor do we have faith in most of the media outlets that are sharing it with us. And that needs to be regained. If we have an algorithm that's built right into the device that we're looking at the image with, that then vets the image and says, this is 20% AI, or this has been done to this image, or nothing's been done to this image, would AI then get us to trust straight photographs more? I think so.
yeah, either that's going to happen, and because AI, the rise of it was so fast, you don't have like ASMP sending lawyers out and working on it. It's just happened. So I don't think I like just assume that what you're looking at is not real if you see it on the internet. And I think once you make that assumption, uh, I would hope that the New York Times and hope the AP, the news sources that I know and trust, have integrity, and I think they do. National Geographic, it seems to be getting policed quite a bit, but just the flood of things that we see, and it
Sure.
also leads the gullible, like sharing AI pictures of houses, like, oh, wouldn't you want to live here? No one's living there. This is a construct. This doesn't. You may as well look at the Shire and say you want to live in Lord of the Rings. It's a Jackson movie. Um, all right. Thank you for the tips, JP. I noticed that actually on the chat, a number of people kept up. They answered their own questions on Print Shield. There's a link on the Print Shield, so the meeting chat has some
Excellent.
answers there.
Yeah, yeah.
So you want to maybe check that out. And Anything parting before we have fun with our giving away our Wacom display? Anything else you want to part wisdom? You've certainly enlightened all of us, and also I have to say you some very strong opinions there, JP. You threw down the glove a couple of times, which is my poor film cameras are gonna they're all looking at you from that wooden case saying, "Oh, what did he say about us? Does- Doesn't he like the grind of advancing the film and turning it, or has he forgotten all about that romance?"
That's all fun. I just don't fetishize it.
Nice.
No, I just encourage everybody to make up their own minds and continue learning. Like I've been studying color my entire life and I continue to study it and still fascinated by it. It's just a deep well. You could just keep going. If you have similar fascinations, just keep going. That you are what makes your work interesting. Photography doesn't make things interesting in and of itself, but people using photography to talk about their passion, that's what interesting. Even if you have an audience of one, even if it's just yourself, if it facilitates that helping you live a deeper, richer life, then mazel tov, like let's celebrate that.
Yeah, 100%. And it's also I think when you just said story, it sort of triggers something, and it's uh, the story behind the photograph also enchants people who are viewing the photograph. The decisions you made, why you photographed it, what you went through to photograph it.
Yeah,
When you were describing the photograph of the pumice, I really I was seeing it inside my head, and that's all part of it. And
it
certainly
is.
that sacred journey is a big part of it.
Yeah, so I think we all need to remember our stories behind, the images are something that it's really rich to share. And we might want to write a few things or just speak a few things and put it in a video or an audio clip that pictures may be silent, but the people who make them are not. And we're hoping that our images stimulate more conversation. And so we can be a part of that. And that just makes the world even more interesting. I mean, one
Yeah,
of the
and
reasons I love looking at photographs is people see the world so differently than I do. And then, I never saw it that way. Isn't that interesting?
well, not just interesting, also tolerable. The world can be a brutal, tough place, and and
Sometimes it really does help, doesn't it?
yeah, I know it's behind the viewfinder is a safe place in most cases. I like it. I'd rather look at photographs than look at the top 10 news stories. All
Right.
right, so this is going to be fun, JP. We're gonna give away this Wacom tablet. We're going to use a technique that we use during the virtual COVID years at B&H Photo at our
Hmm.
events. And what we've got is we've got 77 people are in the Zoom chat right now. This is also being simulcast to YouTube. Unfortunately, the YouTube people won't be able to take advantage of this. This is just the Zoomers. We did hit a peak of 98 people at one time. So it's really an honor and a privilege to be able to turn you on to all these folks that are tuning in. But what I'm going to ask everybody to do is that in the chat, pull up the chat. And if you want to get a chance to win this, I'm going to ask that everybody puts a number between 1 and 300 in the chat. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to write out a number, and whoever gets either the number that I picked or the closest to that number is going to be the winner of the Wacom 12-inch display. It's a $359 display. It's pretty nice. It's like a mini
Yeah.
Cintiq. It's very cool. So
Hmm.
let's jump over to the chat there, everybody. So you can put your name. You can only enter one number once. And I'm going to go full screen on this. And let's see how the chat goes. So, all right,
Hmm.
Victoria, Alexis, Pat, Tom, John. Okay, we got a bunch of numbers coming in. Let me start looking at the numbers. Who's getting close? And keep putting those numbers in. Okay. Okay, it's looking good. I have to do a little bit of math in my head here, a little bit of, okay, that's okay. One, Joan Diaz, 147, 147. I'll just assume that's just 147. Okay. Just make a note here. All right, and okay, it looks like good one, Mario. That was the first number that came to my head. It's always the first. Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. If you were me and I were you, what number would I be thinking? 69, dude. Sorry.
Thanks.
All right, everyone has put it in. I'm going to close it out now. So we are closed. And Douglas said, can we get a transcript? We've recorded it in terms of a transcript, just to ask that one question. A transcript, I don't believe it'll transcript unless YouTube does have a closed caption setting. You can do the closed caption and a beautiful program does that automatically. So I think that you can get a closed caption if you go to the YouTube link that I sent out earlier. And I'm just going to go back here on this list. And the winner is, it was close. Sue Man was very close. Hold on, I'm going to authenticate this. It's looking good going back. And the winner is, hold on. The winner is John Dolber. The winner is John Dolber at 103. The number I wrote was 101. 101 was the number that I wrote. And, oh, hold on a second. No, wait a minute. I'm sorry. Ron Centel at 99. Hold on, John. Hold on. 101. Once you're both 2 away. 100 actually 99. No, you're both 2 away. Okay, John and Ron, you are both tied. You are both 2 numbers away from 101. So it's John and Ron. Let me just write that down. John Dolber and Ron Centel. Okay, hold on. Okay, so this is between Ron and John. You guys are both flipping it away. We're going to flip
John,
a memory card.
John is saying, let Ron enjoy it.
How
That's very kind of John.
Yeah, exactly. Flip a memory card. So everyone can see this good. John, you're going to be heads. You're going to be high performance 16 gig. And Ron, you're going to be the memory connections. So here we go. And the winner is John. It is heads up. John, you are the winner. John, I'm going to ask that you email me your name and your full name and address, your shipping address, John. I know you have david@davidbrommer.com, and we'll get that out to you from Wacom. So that was fun. Thank you, everyone, for participating in that little contest. Listen, John Paul, I only have one complaint, is that it's taken many years to see your face again, and I really hope that we can run into each other, and who knows, we can collaborate somehow. I've always thought you're an amazing instructor, and I hope everyone can benefit from going to your website. Sign up for the insights. If you have the means, take a JP workshop. It will certainly be transformational. And long live the print.
Long time to print. Thank you, David. I look forward to it. And it's nice to see you, even on Zoom.
Pleasure as well. Great. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great night. This has been recorded and will be available to watch on the YouTube channel. Thank you so much. Have a great night, everyone.
Night, everyone. Thanks for joining us.